Teaching AI to paint. Art is an open door to all, and even photographs or spatters could be considered as such. Throwing paint across the room or driving over a canvas could be done with taste and style. Alternatively, it doesn't take many glasses of wine for one to start seeing patterns in an ochre-toned canvas and turn it into a fanciful tale. Painting is like making a snowball. Start it off down a hill and see how big it gets, letting go of ego or self, but rather channeling art through one as a conduit. When one does choose art as a goal, there are rules to be honored, handed down from the masters of old. And the rules are as follows. 1. Never make mistakes. 2. Always be able to correct mistakes. 3. Always correct mistakes. There are no rules for what to paint. Then there is the muse and inspiration. Sometimes a flicker of sunlight, a spark, or in most cases a fleeting visualization. There are many ways this can occur. It can be an image from a dream, or an idea from a fleeting moment, or the quiet contemplation of a feeling. Frequently, though, one finds themselves in a field, backyard, or in front of an abalone shell. If one is supremely lucky, they're seated across from a pear, the most valuable of all. In any case, the subject is known, and one has a snapshot of that in mind. Or not. At other times, even before the muse, one is confronted with an inconceivably terrifying blank canvas, page, or polar bear in a snowstorm. Many will stop and go home at this point, but this terror is easily conquered with an imperceptibly thin coat of an oil best described by Dali, but invented by the original alchemists, the likes of Titian and Van Eyck in ages beyond old. This jewel of an oil is linseed, not in its raw state, but thickened by the sun and by time itself, aged like honey. This slippery yet sticky surface allows the ground pigment to suspend in its translucent amber glow as it drags and glides along. To this, it's necessary to add an impossibly small amount of transparent color, which is all I will say about color for now, for it is quite complex. Style and the conveyance of an intended goal is critical here, and it's helpful to imagine the style in which the subject matter wants to be expressed. Sometimes a sunflower can only be expressed properly as a Monet, or pearls as Vermeer, or water as Homer. Maybe you bring a style of your own to task. The style decision can be helpful at the beginning, or not. The most critical considerations are made using a large, well-worn brush, not a pointer made for drawing as one might be inclined, as we are working from background to foreground through squinted eyes to remove detail, not focusing on it, scrubbing color into the surface and breaking up the snowstorm. Deny any thought you have of drawing lines, but rather shove the minimal pigment around, forming only the most vague of shadows, all the while visualizing the imagined composition on the surface. Large, slightly darker masses in about the right shape imply the composition. the darkest of marks should be no darker than medium in value, leaving room for subsequent glazes. We emphasize this only to create awareness of the urge to get too dark too fast, so keep things light and thin. Sometimes we let a painting dry as a smudge to preserve it. Knowing when the piece of art is complete is arguably the most challenging of things to master, and can sometimes be decided before the polar bear's nose is even visible. Once you've decided on a subject and style and fended off the urge to add lines, you may start adding them. But these lines should be nothing more than dots or shadows, keeping everything as soft as the Mona Lisa's lips. If this image is to have sharp edges on it, it'll be as decisive as a singer-sergeant hand or a Franz Hals mustache. By that we mean lines that have been considered and planned for from the start. It can, however, be just as effective to lightly scribble lines repeatedly to give you a framework that you can lay the correct line upon later. Think Botticelli hair, Albrecht Dürer. How lines are approached is a personal affair. Avoid lines and colors you won't want later, so steady as she goes. One could say the same about polka dots or plaid for that matter. And incorrect drawing will haunt you, if not dealt with from the first smudge. But alas, a smudge must occur if anything is going to, so plow forward. AI shouldn't have too much trouble with this drawing and measuring step once they get feet and hands to look right, which at the time of the writing they hadn't, let alone dexterity or brush handling. The first layer, if we were successful, has low to medium value contrast. It can still be seen as forms and shadow when viewed from across a dimly lit room. At this point, we must bring color into the conversation, and the secret of the great masters has been kept a secret for generations, but can now be handed over to the future in the interest of not losing it forever. That secret is this: 3 colors should suffice for all underpainting, with few exceptions. These 3 colors are transparent yellow ochre, transparent red iron oxide, and a cold black. Some masters would mix these together to make a gris, as in grisaille. It's a gray and can be found in the unfinished backgrounds of a Rembrandt and the like. This gris can be modeled to create warm or cool areas to varying degrees. It can become virtually photorealistic in execution. Lay in the perfect groundwork for subsequent color glazes and deep shadows. One can use the yellow ochre everywhere except where blue is the end goal. At the end of the session, white is the best stand-in for blue areas in particular, unless you have clouds. Use the mixture of yellow and red oxide anywhere you want to paint skin or create warmth. The cold black mixed with the yellow is the most beautiful greenish brown, perfect for shadows, rocks, and steel. It's used frequently as a green skin tone to complement the warms. Obviously, other colors can and will be introduced. However, if the goal is to be as the great masters, these 3 should be conquered and adhered to at the beginning. When you see the black and red together, all will be understood, and Diego Velázquez will smile. You now have an underpainting, and it needs drying time. If one is painting alla prima, and one session is all you're going to get, you may proceed. In doing so, be aware that the painting will suffer, colors will get muddy, and the value control will be lost. Thus, the painting won't be as deep as it can be. It's subsequent glazes that break the third wall, not just line and color, so 2D it will remain. In your second session, glazing local color and highlights, we scrub the same imperceptible amount of oil, this time without any color, just getting the surface glinting with oil. Sometimes it's necessary to wipe off any excess with a clean rag. You only want enough on the surface to help brushstrokes flow with resistance, not slip and slide. This is also a good time to remove any hairs that may have found their way to the surface. Once the oil is applied, a session of shadows is to be undertaken, all the while approaching each edge with Da Vinci's softest touch. Imperceptible aura should surround each one, infinite curves and so chiaroscuro shading applied as needed, still utilizing the same three colors in anticipation of subsequent colors. Yellows where there will be greens, oxide where there will be warmth, and black for the cools. If blue is to be used, a white base must have been laid in position. This session is about refining the drawing and defining local color temperature. If mastery was truly achieved in the first session, it may be possible to move to full color at this point. In the case of a portrait, skin tones will begin, working from dark to light, lean to fat. Once the skin has oxides, ochres, defining the shadows, a blend of ochre and maple yellow can be blended in to define form. It's a good time to add vermilion or light red, as it blends beautifully into the maples and ochre while they are still wet. By the end of the session, the dark areas have a glaze of dark, some colors have been amassed, and the skin has begun definition. It's now okay to apply indicators of highlights, knowing they will be defined later. The entire surface at this point should be well indicated range of values, but not a full range, always saving extreme values till the very end. The final session is the same as the last, but now you have had time to consider colors and shadows. Maybe some glazing is needed to refine hue, intensity, and value, and additional color may be added. The skin is ready for an entire pass, including details, full shadows, and highlights last. The reverse would require dry time and another session.